Well, good morning, friends. Good morning. Is everybody sufficiently caffeinated by now? Okay. Great. We're going to gather over here and begin some of our pre-programming. If we can have everyone gather near the stage, we're going to hear from a very special opening speaker, and then actually start on some of our tours as folks are still coming over from the hotel and beginning this remarkable conversation. Who was here last night for the concert, by the way? Did y'all have a good time? Wasn't that great? If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, Brooke Hathaway has arranged a phenomenal visual presentation of what we heard last night. And so come take a look at some of what Dr. Otis Moss Jr. and Justin Dillon and Jars of Clay and Isaac Curry shared with us depicted on this board over here. So this morning we're going to hear from an opening speaker and then start going on some tours, and then we will formally kick things off with our TED Talks in the auditorium at 9:30. But again, my name is Joshua Dubois. I led the White House Faith-Based Initiative for a number of years for President Obama, and now lead an organization called Values Partnerships. And with my wife Michelle and Scott Buckout and a great team, we help a range of partners connect with the faith community, from Oprah Winfrey to Amnesty International, and it's been awesome coming alongside the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center on this summit that's seeking to connect to really important conversations, the conversation around racial reconciliation and social justice, and that around ending human trafficking and modern slavery. We're going to get into that topic in detail throughout the day, but first I want to introduce Dr. CG Newsome, the president of this phenomenal building that you're standing in right now, the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Dr. Newsome is really one of our country and really our world's preeminent freedom fighters. He is the past president of Shaw University and previously served as dean of the School of Divinity at Howard University, a triple alumnus of Duke University, and has been navigating the intersection between these two issues for years, particularly in his current role as head of this Freedom Center. He'll talk to you a little bit more about what the center is doing day to day and the vision for the future. But please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. C.G. Newsome.
Well, good morning, everyone. I tell you, to now look out over this space and see you all here and see God revealed in the flesh is so deeply moving to me, as is my very distinct pleasure and joy to welcome you to your National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, a nation's gem, or I should say a gem in the life of our nation when it comes to freedom. I want to share with you just a little of my background as to how it seems that God got me to this place, even as it were delivering me to Cincinnati as God delivered Jonah to Nineveh. It was not my intention. And several times I demurred and said to the search consultant, no, that's somebody else's job, it's not mine. I'm doing what I think I should be doing. And the search consultant reminded me that I am an ordained minister being asked to connect to a work of faith. And when that happened, I said, uh-oh, he's got my MO. And I thought back on it some, and I realized that as the dean of the Howard School of Divinity, my ministry had all been caught up with freedom. Many of you all perhaps are not aware that Howard University itself is an outcome of the Amistad movement. Because of the successful release of those men and women on that boat, men and women in Connecticut, affiliated with the Congregational Church, now the United Church of Christ, were moved to create a theological school in the nation's capital to train abolitionist ministers. And without getting too deep in the story, that school is the theological school and the university in general. And then I ended up at Shaw University. And arriving there as president, found out that I was presiding over an institution whose main campus was located where Sherman bivouacked his army after he'd gone through Georgia and come up through South Carolina, arrived in Raleigh, and where we convened students on the main campus of Shaw University is where Sherman had his army encamped. It's also, Shaw University, the place where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was founded. Shaw is the first of the historically black colleges or universities to have been founded in the South. So all of this sort of makes sense to me now as to why I'm in front of you, helping with a very powerful vision that a group of people affiliated with the National Council of Christians and Jews, the local chapter here, had back in 1994 when they were preparing to celebrate their 50th anniversary. And some of those folks are in this room. I want to acknowledge them because they're also a part of our board of directors. I see at least a couple. If I miss others, please raise your hands. But I see Mr. John Pepper over there, whose guiding spirit and unfailing support, well, it just wouldn't be the case that we would be here now were it not for him. So John, would you please hold your hand up? A carrier of the flame. And Judge Nathaniel Jones, over there to my right. Judge, would you please hold your hand up? Another member of our board and a carrier of the flame. Are there any other directors here? Anyone connected with the NCC and J back during that time? I want to recognize you at this point in time, but there was some thought that the National Council of National Conference of Christians and Jews, the local chapter, should do something very, very, very special. And out of that conversation came this beautiful monument to freedom, this National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, a spectacular, spectacular memorial. I can't help but think that somebody in that group had in mind that passage in Joshua that goes something like this, that this shall be a sign among you, that in that time when your children shall ask, what mean these stones? Doesn't it give you goosebumps? That you have these stones. These are very, very special stones. These just aren't any old stones, but they are placed in a way, look at all the curves, very intentional to remind us of the ebb and flow of life by way of the ebb and flow of the river, and to bring to mind the significance of this particular river out here, the Ohio River, which was so widely recognized as the River Jordan during the days of slavery. This was the pathway for so many countless people to freedom, coming out of Kentucky into Ohio, and then finding refuge wherever they could in pursuit of freedom. We are those children asking today, what mean these stones? And this is why we've been summoned to the banks of the Ohio here in Cincinnati. It's a wonderful story that I've got to tell very, very briefly here. When the Continental Congress, the two of them met to discuss freedom, you know, they came upon a nice, convenient compromise. They worked out everything, for the most part, on this matter of freedom to make colonies join or to facilitate colonies coming together to form a nation, so long as they didn't eradicate slavery. And then there was this Congress of the Confederation. Actually, there were two of them. So they had to tidy up and do some things that the Continental Congresses didn't do. And the second of these Congresses of the Confederation got around to annexing land, primarily the Northwest Territory, again with great debates about freedom, and by one vote, it was decided that the Northwest Territory would be annexed as a free territory. The Northwest Territory being the Midwest, the principal metropolitan or municipal area, which was Cincinnati. And since then, 1789, this nation has still been working out the issue of freedom and slavery. It is an unfinished agenda. And with this territory being designated free right across the river from a slave state, and so much commerce being involved between the interplay of people on this side of the river and people on that side of the river, the issue of slavery was a hot topic. And those who promoted freedom found themselves in great discourse, trying to argue their point of view in the face of a countervailing perspective. Men and women flooded in from the New England area to try to establish abolitionism here, and those on the other side of the river who were trying to capitalize on slave labor wanted anything but a free territory. And we are here partly to continue the discussion as to whether this will be a slave nation or a free nation. And the guiding spirit through it all was very biblically based on both sides of the river. I do tell people that in telling the story of the Underground Railroad, don't truncate it because you really miss the faith dimension and component of the people who escaped from slavery and those who helped them, the intrepid, brave souls, white and free blacks, who helped them, who placed everything they had on the line. I say to people, you got to say more than folks came up out of Kentucky and got here to Ohio and were free. That doesn't even begin to capture what was going on, because it was so much more about people trying to come up out of a slave state to get into a so-called free state. It was about people in search of that existential reality, that state of grace in life called freedom. And as we study the lives of all the people who were part of the network of the Underground Railroad, we come into a wonderful understanding of a faith journey that has everything to do with why we are here and the meaning of freedom. This word freedom, this is when I knew the Lord had assigned me to this place. I began to research afresh, having said yes to the invitation to come. And here's what I came to find out, that this word freedom entered the human vocabulary around 5,500 years ago. We're able to trace it back to that point. We're able to identify the Proto-Indo-European word from which the word freedom is derived. I don't know if any of you all can guess what that word is. Well, we're under some time constraints, so I'm not going to do, whatnot, raise your hands and so forth. The word freedom comes from the word to pray. The word freedom is derived from the word to pray. And the declension goes something like this: to befriend oneself, to love oneself, to own oneself. As if to own oneself is to communicate to God appreciation and gratitude for the gift of life that God has given to each and every one of us, to befriend ourselves and to love ourselves on account of the fact that God first loved us. The pursuit of freedom is a steady, constant prayer to God in recognition of who God is and who we are, in honor of his love for us. And no one can take that love from us because God has made it a special gift to each and every one of us, wrapped in a very beautiful package with our name on it and not another person's. Only Judge. I don't know if that's a name that many of you all know. I sometimes say that we talk about a father of our country, George Washington, but there's also a mother of our country. And it wasn't Martha. It was this woman by the name of Only Judge. She was a slave in the Washington household. And during the second administration of George Washington, Oni made her way to freedom with the help of free blacks in Philadelphia. Years later, when she was living in New Hampshire, a pauper, George Washington, having tried many times to get her back, he was furious about it, never succeeded. Years later, when she was old and impoverished beyond imagination, an interviewer asked her if she had it to do all over again, would she, in point of fact, escape to freedom? And without hesitation, she said, yes, I would. He said, well, now, you know, even as a slave, you had it better than most folk. You had a shelter, you had clothing, you had food, you even had some prestige as a member of the president's household. Would you escape to freedom? She said, absolutely, because I was made a child of God by the means of escaping to freedom. I was made a child of God. Now, all of us children of God have come to this place today to do the work of freedom, to have a conversation at the intersection of the cross. Regardless of what the front of the battle we have chosen, it's all one front. And we all need each other to do this holy, sacred work in the name of Him who loves us. I invite you now to this town hall, to this sanctuary, to this place that takes up the work of freedom. I say we do the work of Washington outside and beyond the Beltway, to take up this work of freedom on this sacred ground. And I look forward to interacting with you and sharing with you how we understand freedom here. We use the phrase inclusive freedom. I'll say more about that later. And share with you the principles of freedom that we come to understand by studying the lives of the men and women who were involved with the Underground Railroad network. We are underground. But you know what? When the Holy Ghost is there with you, it feels all right. And when you can see yourself coming up and out from under on behalf of those who are shackled to some dark, dank underground place right now, the work is even glorious. God bless you, and so glad you're here.